Our next speaker is Dr. Nasir.
Thank you. I actually like to, after Shelley's comment, I just like to say that I'm not from a family of victims, I'm from a family of freedom fighters. And Shelley actually brought up an important issue that we actually talk about the victimization of women, but we don't talk about the women's participation as freedom fighter. One of my sisters actually actively participated in the War of Liberation. So I think that should be actually brought into focus, not as only victim, as a freedom fighter. Most of the things I just wanted to talk about actually already been discussed. So I'm not going to go into much detail. Just I want to bring some issues for the awareness of the audience and people. First thing is, as you can see that genocide in Pakistan is perhaps the worst genocide in shortest time span in the history of the world. This is according to United Nations in 1981. And also, as Dr. Adam Jones mentioned, that this is perhaps one of the least documented, least researched, and the least known genocide in the modern history. But if you look at the data of the genocide and compare with other genocide that happened after Second World War, you see that about estimated 1.5 million people were killed in only 9 months, as Mr. Shahriar Kabir and others mentioned. So the severity of this genocide actually should have put it in this atrocities or genocide of 1971 as one of the most severe in the modern history. But for some reason, it did not get that much attention. Now, if you look at studies by various authors, like most recent is being Van Tiernan of Yale University in 2007. If you look at the numbers mentioned in those studies, you'll see that a consensus emerged of the number of deaths killed in that in 1971. It's somewhere between 1.5 million to 1.7 million. So that also shows the severity of the genocide atrocities in 1971. Now, one of the most authentic study actually that based on the remains of the human body and skull counts is mentioned in Kalyan Chaudhuri. It was published in 1972. It estimated or showed the death tolls as 1.2 million. So you see that that's only 9 months. So if you consider all this data, if you look at all this data, then one question we must ask that what happened to the justice? What happened to the justice? Why justice were not served? As we know that there was a law, Collaborators Act of 1972 and International Crime Tribunal Act in 1973. And Collaborators Act was repealed in 1975 with a martial law promulgation, and it was ratified through a constitutional amendment in 1979. It's called Fifth Amendment. But if you look at that, why would someone do such a heinous act by repealing an act that wants the war crimes to be tried? There was a political expediency of a military ruler, General Zia. If you look at why they were pardoned or provided immunity, the reason is that if you look at that, there's symbiosis at work. That military dictator needed a political legitimacy, and the perpetrators and the collaborators needed immunity and social and political rehabilitations. And there was a vacuum. After 1971, defeats of the Pakistan Army and the Bangladeshi collaborators, they needed some space, and General Zia needed some political legitimacy. So that gave them actually to come together and have this law removed. What I just want to talk about at what cost. Look at that. Because of that immunity and social and political rehabilitations of the perpetrators, what happened? We have been able to institutionalize religion in politics through Fifth Amendment in 1979 and Eighth Amendment in 1988. Violence against Hindu minority that occurred in 1990, 1992, and 2001. Killings of the pro-liberation cultural activities, political activities, university teachers. Those are simply, if you look at it, you'll see a strange resemblance to 1971. Now, look at another thing. This is the bombing campaign during 2001 and 2006. You see that this bombing campaign, you can trace this campaign to people who are actually opposing 1971 War of Liberation. And they also perpetrated in many ways in the genocide and rapes and destruction. So because of this immunity, you see that what's happening right now. We see distorted views in the textbook. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school and junior school, I did not study, I did not read history from the textbook, so I had to give up history as my subject. I learned history as oral history from my sisters, my brothers, my fathers, the freedom fighters. I was going to attempt those oral history in my exams, classroom exams, and I failed. They gave me 0 because the classroom textbook was distorted. The history was rewritten in those books. If you look at the documents of the War of Liberation, you will see that major libraries in Bangladesh do not have documents concerning the War of Liberation. Those were systematically destroyed and have been destroyed by these forces of collaborators and perpetrators. So, if you look at the current state of violence in particular and law and order situation in general in Bangladesh, we can see that you can trace them back to the immunity of the war crimes, social and political rehabilitation of the perpetrators. So unless this immunity to mass murders are revoked, justice served, the country will continue to fail to ensure safe, secured, and free lives for its citizens. So I thank Kean University for providing me this opportunity. I'm not a scholar of genocide, but I have a moral obligation as a citizen of a country that gave us passport, recognition in the world. So from that moral obligation, actually, I'm working as a human rights activist to promote this cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nasir, for your comments and for taking it into the more contemporary era.